I just want to thank you all for taking time out of your day, especially on a Friday, to join this webinar and talk about executive functioning and just kind of where we're at with this idea and our kids in the classroom and how we can best help them. If you want live captioning, you can get that from your computer. Down at the bottom, you should have a toolbar. You can go to live transcript and then just enable the auto transcription. I will say that Zoom's transcription has improved greatly, and it's doing a really nice job capturing what the speaker is saying. So I know I hopped out of my screen share for just a moment, but I'm going to get back in there. And it's just because my Zoom is doing something weird and I don't like it, but we'll roll with it. So we can go ahead. Let's get started today. All right, so we're here to talk about executive functioning and how it's affecting our kiddos today in the classroom. So we're going to do just a little welcome and intro, and then we're going to talk about what the heck is executive function? Why is executive functioning important for our students? And I think most of us can probably give an answer to that to some degree at this point. I'm hoping that you will learn and get some great takeaways from this as to why it is also important, even more now than ever. We're going to talk about some applications for the classroom, and then we're going to finish up with some questions and an evaluation that I'm going to ask that you guys do for me. So there is a Padlet resource that you guys have access to, and you can scan the QR code on your phone if you want to pull it up on your phone. If you want to have a separate browser open on your computer, you can go to padlet.com/IEPRC/executive functioning. And this Padlet is a living document. So I will add to it as we progress, as we learn more about executive functioning, and as we come across some resources to help our students and sometimes staff with these issues. So save this Padlet because you will have it to go back to. There will also be a recording of the presentation on there so that you can go back and watch it, or you can pass it on to someone else. This link is open for you to send to everyone. Can I put the address in the chat? I sure think so. Kim, give me 1 second. We'll see if I can do this here. All right. There has to be a way to copy and paste this. And I'm sure I know it, but sometimes I get so nervous about the technology portion that I just miss things. There we go. Hopefully. Oh, and thank you, Cassandra, for also putting that in there. I really appreciate it. Okay. So let's move on. So I hope that throughout our time today, you will be able to identify executive functions. And I am guaranteed that you're going to be able to already list some of those executive functions. I just hope that maybe I introduce you to a new one or one you haven't thought of in a while. We're going to talk about how executive functioning affects learning, and then we're going to identify strategies in the classroom and within the school setting. So the first thing that we are going to do is just to do a little poll. I really want to understand where you guys are coming from in your buildings, what grade level you're working with. So we're going to go to this poll, and we're going to use menti.com. So you should have a couple of options. You can click on this QR code, or I'm sorry, use your camera and go to the QR code and open that, and it should take you to the Menti, or you can go to menti.com And I'm going to put that in the chat right now, menti.com. And then you're just going to want to enter this code 44798653. And full disclosure, this is where technology is either my friend or not. So we're going to go to another screen share. Oh, and some of you are already answering. I can see. Thank you so much. I want you all to be able to see. All right, so the first question that I want to know is who's here today? So I don't remember the order, but I know special education teacher. Are you a general education teacher? Are you a para? Okay, thank you, Kim. That was going to be my next question, was that if you were in the other category, what is your role? So it looks like we've got mostly special education teachers. Let's see. So let's go to the next question. Oh. With what level of students do you work? So I am just curious where you're at. Maybe you're exclusively elementary, middle. All right, we've got one high school. This is kind of important for me to know because I really want to gear this training specifically to you. So if I have a bunch of elementary educators, I would try to talk more about elementary strategies and skills. It looks like right now, middle and high school kind of went, oh, there we have an elementary and mixed. So we're kind of all over the place, which is fantastic. So I ask and I challenge you that if I start to talk about one specific area or one specific level of students over another, in the chat, just give me a gentle nudge that I do, in fact, need to be sure that I am hitting all grade levels in school, because this is really about impacting all learners in our buildings. Okay, so my next, and this is my last question to you, what's one thing that you hope to learn or take away from our session today? I want to be sure that I get to your questions that you have as we progress, but if you can think of just one thing now that you hope to learn or maybe have a better understanding of, I want to give you the opportunity to put it up here. And maybe you don't have anything yet. Maybe you're not sure what you want to learn, and that's completely okay too. Tips and tricks. All right. Real life applicable, ready to use tools, quick and easy strategies. Oh, these are great. Okay, strategies to use with students who exhibit executive functioning struggles. Okay, so in the presentation, I think I hit on all of these at some point, but please let me know if I'm not answering something specific for you. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. We'll see if I can get this down. All right, so hopefully you are seeing this screen with the presentation. Someone in the chat, if you could just give me a thumbs up or say yep or something so that I know that you guys can see the slideshow, I would appreciate it. Yes, thank you, Cassandra, and thank you, Kim. Thank you, Felicia. All right. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what exactly is executive functioning, because it has several different definitions based on, research, what a researcher is trying to find out. And so we have all of these different ideas and concepts running through our brains about what executive functioning is. A few years ago, our resource center had the ability to have Sarah Ward present to a summer institute, and one of our staff members sat down and had an interview with her. So the full interview is on our website. Meredith, I see your question. No worries at all. I know I will put the Padlet link back in the chat so that you can pull the Padlet up if you want to see it as we work through this. See, I'm putting it in the chat right now. So hopefully if you open up a second screen, a tab on your computer, you'll be able to see it. So this is just a snippet of the interview with Sarah Ward from when our center had her. And I'm going to play it. And I know when I've done it before, I've had some issues with sound. So I am going to try a couple of things. So just bear with me. But if you have issues hearing it, let me know. I feel the content is very valuable. And this is just a couple of minutes long. So let's see. So I think in education. Okay, so. Well, it's hiding my sound. Here we go.
Basic science and history, etc. But executive function is equally one of those skills that you just need to have all people in general utilize every single day. So it's really this skill that gives you the ability to know what your plan and what your goal is, and to really see into the future what it is that you want to accomplish, and then figure out, what is it that I'm going to do to actually achieve that goal, and then how do I initiate that goal and carry it out and self-monitor that it's going okay, that I sort of achieved goal versus actual. And I think the thing about that is that starts at the very early age of preschool, where we just start with even play, and with play we're imagining the goal is, well, I have a block, but my goal is that it's a fire truck. So I figure out, how do I need to act and interact with that block to make it be a fire truck and to be a fire truck scene, and for me to take on the role of, say, being a fireman. As you emerge into the elementary ages, all teachers need to be teaching this to kids, because in the elementary age, it's now being able to plan within the classroom. So if the teacher gives you an assignment, you now have to be able to say, okay, well, what's my plan to move through the classroom to obtain the items that I need and to sit down, and how do I know what the assignment is, and then I'm working my way through it. And then as you get older and you hit sort of that middle and high school, you have to hold on to that plan over farther space and time. So now it's no longer be in the classroom, but I'm at my locker and I have to think about, what is it that I need when I go down the hall, up the stairs into my other classroom? And I have to remember to turn in my homework and make sure that I have the items for that class. Maybe it's goggles for my science experiment, or my lab journal for recording the data in from the experiment in. And then you have to hold on to that sort of future image even farther across time. So it's being able to be at school and say, all right, well, now I'm going to go home this afternoon and I'm going to be home in 3 hours. And I have to remember, what is that homework? If I'm at home, what materials do I see that I have with me that I'll need? So that eventually, as you get older and older and you become employed and go through college, etc., now it's holding on to, all right, well, what is the project that I'm working on? When is the due date? How am I responsible for managing the materials and carrying out getting it? So it's just a universal skill that we all have to do, and it grows and changes with age. So it's important that educators are addressing it from as young as preschool all the way through high school. And I think that's a big question I get. I think a lot of people will say, well, executive function, isn't that just sort of, recording your homework and organizing your backpack? We don't have to worry about that until middle school, or we don't have to worry about that because they're not doing that for projects until high school. But It's just a skill that starts at a very young age, where we really have to teach kids how to improve their working memory and to hold on to their goal and carry it out over time.
And it affects everything, every other academic skill, and absolutely.
Okay, so hopefully you heard that okay, and hopefully you are now hearing me okay. So if you are struggling with hearing me, please let me know. I did switch the audio back, I hope.
So I think in education where
Okay, so I want to mention just briefly, just some overview of executive functioning. But before I do that, I must have skipped over this quote. I really like this quote regarding executive functioning, because it really makes me stop and think about children and where they are with executive functioning. So children aren't born with these skills. They're born with the potential to develop them. Some children may need more support than others to develop these skills. In other situations, if children do not get what they need from their relationships with adults and the conditions in their environments, or worse, if those influences are sources of toxic stress, their skill development can be seriously delayed or impaired. So this quote speaks to several things that Sarah mentioned. The fact that these skills are taught, that they need to be taught early, and the environment can have an impact on executive function skills. So this quote uses the word sources like toxic stress. And so there are some parts of a student's life that are causing them toxic stress that we don't have any control over, right? Home life, we don't really have control over that. But things that go on at home are going to affect executive functioning in the classroom.
So
just as an overview, I again want to restate that research doesn't agree on just one definition. Researchers will have different definitions based on research that they're looking at, or just, even what year it is, because we learn so much more with each passing day about executive functioning. So let's see. EF skills refer to a set of skills we use every day to learn, work, and manage our daily life. So there you go for the Padlet. Whoever asked for that, let me see. Laura Marr. Let me know if it doesn't work for you. And thanks for joining us. So executive functioning skills are skills that we're not just using in the academic realm, right? We're using these skills every single day when we're at home, when we're at work, when we're playing. We always are using executive skills. These are the foundational building blocks for both cognitive and social abilities. And that social abilities piece is very important to us right now, because we are seeing students who haven't been in the classroom for a couple of years. And so it's really affecting their classroom social behaviors, their academic achievement, and we must think about these things. So these skills help us focus, hold information, handle distractions. Those are just some basics. We know that they are essential for academic success. All research tells us that using and having functioning, executive functioning skills is going to help us to be more successful. So early intervention is crucial. And sometimes as educators, we think that maybe we can't teach executive functioning skills, but we can. And we have to do it through repetition. You can't just use and practice a skill 1 or 2 times and expect it to just automatically be there the next time, right? We have to keep practicing. So executive functioning relates positively to learning, to all parts of learning, to the process of learning. So how students are understanding the information, the how of learning, how are you taking in information, and the what of learning. What exactly is it that I'm supposed to show you that I know? All of these areas are going to be impacted by executive functioning skills. All right, so again, these skills are learned and developed. So I've said it 3 times, it'll be on the test at the end. It's important to keep in mind and understand the executive functioning skills are not something that we're just born with. We aren't born with the ability to time manage. We aren't born with the ability to effectively organize a research paper. We have to be taught these skills. And as we think about when these skills develop, they really start to develop between the ages of 3 and 5. So this is when children are getting the foundation for executive functioning skills. So if you think about, the ages of 3 to 5, we might see a kiddo in preschool for a few hours a day. If we're lucky, they'll be in preschool 5 days a week. But think about those kiddos who aren't in preschool. Maybe those kiddos who stay home. Some of these skills aren't going to develop because they're not going to have always the social interaction, that peer piece, to help some of these executive functioning skills. So skills aren't embedded, and the skills form and develop as the brain develops. So in the chat, does anyone want to start to take a guess about these skills forming and developing as the brain develops, and issues that we might see in the classroom as relating to some of these things not happening? Turning in work, completing work, recording assignments. That's right. And so when you think about things like turning in work and completing work and relating that to how the brain is going to develop, well, if you've never been taught that you have to have a time limit for something, or you've never been taught how to turn in a paper, that's going to affect organization in the classroom. Just like Sarah said, poor organization, trouble getting started, absolutely losing things, completing an assignment once starting it. Yes, Allison, and one strategy that we're going to talk about is how to get that kiddo to completion. Because sometimes some children, they just never get to the finished product, right? And they never get that accomplishment, that feeling that, oh my goodness, yes, I can do this. Okay, so in the classroom, what might poor executive functioning skills look like? And I found this scribble graphic and I absolutely loved it, because I think that this so accurately can define the mind of a child. Disorganized, impulsive, this looks emotional, right? We see incomplete work, some of those things that you guys talked about in the chat: difficulty with goal setting, forgetful, no self-control, easily distracted, cannot plan ahead, rigid in routines. Is there anything else in there that you can think of that I didn't put? As you are kind of thinking about that, I also want to mention that executive functioning may look like a student choosing not to complete work, or choosing not to do what you're asking, or finish the assignment, finish anything that you are saying in class, even something as simple as staying in your seat. But choosing a behavior versus how a student is wired is a concept that I know I've forgotten many times as an educator. Sometimes what we foresee as choosing isn't choosing. Rather, it's just what that child is coming to our classroom with. And so we have to be proactive rather than reactive in our classrooms. So we need to build up our skills so that we can put systems into place that are really there to teach the kids beforehand, to practice, so that we don't have to react. And I will tell on myself a lot as a teacher as we go through this. I taught middle school for 19 years, and I love 7th grade. That's my favorite grade to teach. But those kiddos are a mess, right? I mean, 7th grade is such a hard time. And I taught other grades, but 7th grade was my absolute favorite. Another point I want to bring up as we talk about some of these behaviors. If you're familiar with Dr. Russell Barkley, he's kind of like the grandfather of executive functioning. You really can't do a training without mentioning him and his work. He's extensively researched executive functioning. But he talks about now with kids not being in school consistently over the last few years and just increased difficulties at home, that what we're really seeing now is that students are 2 to 3 years behind in these executive functioning skills. So what we were really seeing at a kindergarten level or a 9th grade level, we just aren't seeing until much later. So, in high school, we would think that as a student should be able to manage time and take a test and get done within an allotted period of time. But the reality right now is that that just isn't happening. And I just want to remind you that these skills are taught. And so it's going to be our job to teach our students these skills. So if you're used to working with high school, you may want to consider going to middle school teachers and saying, hey, can you give me some suggestions? Because what you're seeing in your classroom now as a 9th or a 10th grade teacher may be what teachers were seeing in 7th and 8th grade students 4 years ago. So really lean into those resources that you have within your own building as well. There is a lot of brain research on executive functioning, and this is a very crude and elementary explanation of a few things. I'm not going to pretend like I am a neuroscientist, nor will I pretend like I'm an expert in this field. The brain is an amazing, amazing thing that I'm not going to pretend like I know all about it, because I don't. But there are just some basic principles that I wanted to look at. So we have all these nerve cells in our brain, right? They're just kind of running rampant, but they're sending signals to all of these other parts of our body. And so these nerve cells connect through synapses, and these little synapses are important. It helps to create that ability to send a message and to receive a message. So as a baby, we are born with roughly 2,500 synapses, and each of these little synapses is just another opportunity for us to learn and to store information. By the time a child is 3, there's about 15,000 of these little synapses. And then we have this other major surge around the age of 25. And this is where the brain really starts to gel in that prefrontal cortex. So we're seeing this, research is suggesting, at a little bit later stage in life. And this is very important because that prefrontal cortex is responsible for rational decision-making, planning. It's so important. And if that's really not developing, then we need to take that proactive approach in school and teach some of these behaviors. So the brain can change. There's this idea of neuroplasticity, right? That just it basically means that the brain can shape and mold and learn new things. The reverse of that is that the brain also does what we call pruning. So if you like flowers or gardening, you know the purpose of pruning, right? To trim the dead parts of the plant so that the parts that are living can thrive. And so our brain does that too. So if we don't use something, our brain is going to start to prune it. Think about the summer break, right? It's like you teach students by May, it's like they're up here. And then when they come back in late July or August, they've lost, right? It's because our brains are pruning information away that we aren't using on a daily basis. So the neurons that kind of fire through these synapses that help us to learn and retain information are adversely affected by many factors like stress. So if a child is stressed at home, they're going to come into our classrooms with some of these skills lacking. Lack of stimulation. So if a child isn't getting exposure to same-aged peers or to other social interactions, they're not going to develop these skills. Neurotoxins can be hampered in their ability to form new patterns of connectivity. And so this is where we start to lose some of these synaptic connections. It's generally agreed upon among scientists and researchers that learning occurs when the acquisition of new information causes these synaptic changes. So we want these changes. Mental performance is totally reliant on the health of the brain's complex network of all of these different synapses. So one thing that can really affect the mental health and mental performance of our brain is sleep. Our brain is doing all of its recovery when we're sleeping. And so if a child isn't getting enough sleep, or even as an adult, think about yourself. If you're not getting enough sleep, you know you're not performing at your best. And it's because your brain didn't have enough time to kind of recover from the day for it to process everything, keep it stored, what needs stored, get rid of what doesn't need to stay, and then you wake up feeling refreshed. And so the brain is just such an amazing, amazing thing that we have. So repetition and reinforcement can improve our executive functioning skills. It can improve attention, focus, help us regulate our emotions, all of that good stuff that we need. So here are 11 skills that we're going to talk about in our time together today. I have starred the first three: response inhibition, working memory, and emotional control. Most research as it relates to school is going to focus a lot on these three qualities, but I believe that we need to look at all of these. And it doesn't matter the age of the child. Like Sarah said, even in play, a child is setting a goal to make a block a train. And sometimes we don't think of that as setting a goal, but it really is. So we're going to talk about each of these areas, and I will attempt to go through them quickly so that we have maximum time to go through different strategies that we can apply and use in the classroom. But if you have a question about one of them, please type it in the chat and we'll get to it. So executive functioning skills are really broken down into two different categories. We have the thinking, the cognition, working memory, planning and prioritizing, organization, time management, and metacognition. So these skills are designed to select and achieve goals or to develop a solution to the problem that we are having. These skills help to create a picture of the goal in our mind. And we're going to talk about the importance of creating that mental picture in our brain as we execute a task. Without the vision of an outcome in mind, we're going to be very open to distractors. So getting that vision of what the final product looks like is important. And when I say final product, I don't just mean an assignment turned in. I could potentially mean having a class that raises hands instead of blurting out an answer every time you ask for a response. So we have thinking, and then we have the doing. So it's the cognitive part and the behavioral part. So this is the part where we're putting that vision into action. So do we have that goal-directed persistence, the cognitive flexibility? If something goes awry, can we jump to a different potential solution? How quickly can we recover from that? response inhibition, emotional control, sustained attention, and task initiation. So we have to have the vision, and then we have to know how to get there. So as we work through this PowerPoint, I'm going to ask you guys, you can write these down, or you can just kind of take mental note, whatever will work best for you. On each of these 11 categories, we're going to use the same Likert scale. So 1, you strongly disagree with the statement. Give yourself a 2 if you disagree, 3 if you tend to agree, a 4 if you tend to agree, 5 if you agree, 6 if you strongly agree. So it is important as we think about helping students in classrooms with executive functioning skills that we actually know our strengths and our opportunities for improvement with executive functioning skills. Oftentimes we don't see where we're lacking. Sometimes we lack that self-awareness. As we're going to find out, one of the highest forms of executive functioning is metacognition, that ability to step back and really evaluate your learning, your thinking about your thinking. And so as we go through, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my strengths and some areas where I have great opportunities for growth. If we say something that resonates with you, or you want to admit, oh, I am so guilty of this, or man, I can nail this, I am so good, feel free to put it in the chat. I want this to be as interactive as it possibly can over Zoom. So as we look at the first area, we're going to look at response inhibition. And I want you to think about, and I put this one first because I think in our classrooms, this is one area that we can see executive functioning deficits. Also on the Padlet, there is a link under resources. It's a link to a website from the book Smart But Scattered, which I have linked in here at the end of the show, or at the end of the presentation. But there is a checklist, and this is the checklist that the book uses to kind of see where your executive function skills lie. So there is actually, it's called Smart But Scattered for children, Smart But Scattered for teens, and then there's just a general Smart But Scattered book. But if you click on the link in the resources tab in the Padlet, you'll be taken to, it's a one-page questionnaire. I think it's a front and back, and you have access to this questionnaire. So you may want to use it with staff members, because oftentimes I think staff members, teachers, sometimes we struggle with controlling some executive functioning behaviors in our classrooms when they aren't our strongest executive functioning skills. And it's important to learn and know where we might have our personal deficits. There is no way that we can be a rock star at every single one of these areas. So it's important to just admit, own it. Oh goodness, I know I'm bad at this. So the 3 questions that we're going to look at, I don't jump to conclusions. I think before I speak. I make sure I have all the facts before I take action. So be honest with yourself. I'm not going to ask you to share your answers, but on that scale of 1 to 6, where do you fall with each of those? So response inhibition is thinking before acting. I would venture to say that everyone's having issues with this. If this is something that you're seeing in your schools, feel free to let me know, or let me know if your kiddos are not having issue with this. I won't spend as much time on it. Basically, that resisting to that urge to say something. And I find that I get a little better with this as I age, but this skill has taken a long time to develop. So in the classroom, what is it going to look like if a student is struggling with response inhibition? Well, it might be the child who's always blurting out answer. Even if you say, don't answer, I want to give everyone an opportunity, they can't help it. And it goes back to that idea of the behavior. Is it the student choosing, or is it just what they're coming to us with? Because if it's just what they're coming to us with, then that's on us to be proactive and to teach skills and strategies to help that. And we'll talk about some of those. Accepts losing or being wrong. Ask before taking another child's item. Able to not argue if unhappy with the situation. I'm still working on this with my 17-year-old daughter, and I will be happy to take any suggestions on this. But, I venture to guess that we're seeing a lot of these behaviors in the classroom. So next is working memory. So the 3 questions that I want you to agree or disagree with. I have a good memory for facts, dates, and details. I'm very good at remembering the things I have committed to. I seldom need reminders to complete tasks. So working memory is going to be crucial for all stages of learning. But if students aren't getting a foundational practice at working memory, then it's only going to be impeded as they get older and move throughout school. So working memory and short-term memory are 2 different things. Does anyone know in the chat, can anyone tell me the difference between working memory and short-term memory? Give you a second to answer because I need to grab a drink. I wish Zoom would let me know if someone were typing, because if you're typing, I don't want to cut you off, but I don't want to give too much wait time either. So if you're typing out an answer, keep on going. But short-term memory is really that ability to just hold a task in our mind, right? Like remembering a phone number and being able to repeat it back. Working memory takes that short-term memory a step further, because it's taking that new information that we acquired and it's really working it in our brains to come up with something new. So we have to hold on to that new piece of information that we just learned. Then we have to use that information to create something new. So it's really drawing on those past experiences to apply to a current situation. And it's holding that information the entire time that we are performing a task. So in young children, we would expect an early elementary, a kindergartner, to be able to hold in and follow 1 2-step directions. So this is great in theory, but the reality right now is that we maybe aren't seeing this, that we aren't seeing children as young as kindergarten being able to follow 2-step directions. So working memory also affects older children, because working memory requires that students remember and apply expectations of multiple teachers. We ask a lot of our students, and I didn't always stop and think about that. We are asking a 12-year-old child to go to 7 different teachers in one day, and we are asking him or her to remember the expectations of 7 different adults. We are asking them to remember 7 different procedures, classroom procedures. That's a lot for a child. So as we think about that repetition, maybe you have a specific way you want assignments turned in. We're going to have to practice. We're going to have to do it over and over and over. It may be into the second term, the second 9 weeks, before students are really holding on to some of these expectations. So we'll get into that more with some of these other executive functions. But follow teacher instructions to complete a task, recalling relevant information to answer questions, staying focused and paying attention. So all of these things can be affected by working memory. So next, we're going to take a look at emotional control. My emotions seldom get in the way of my job performance. So I am kind of directing this towards the adult professional, but you can start to see where you could apply this for your students. I'm sure you, as we go through these, you are starting to think of specific students. Little things do not affect me emotionally or distract me from the task at hand. When frustrated or angry, I keep my cool. So really, emotional control, we know, is about the ability to control and manage those emotions. It's going to affect how we complete a task and how we control our behavior. Because we know that if our behavior is escalating, as our behavior escalates, our ability to rationally think and process starts to go down. And so that's important to remember, that as if we think about a baseline, right? We think about emotional control getting out of control and it's going up. Well, the child's working memory, understanding policies and procedures, cognitive skill is just going to start to plummet below that baseline. So these skills are very important, not only for the students, but they're important for us to know, because if you know about yourself that when things don't go your way and you are working up that behavior curve, the escalation curve, then you also know that your cognitive thinking, your ability to be rational, is starting to diminish. And as an educator, it's important to keep that in mind. This is one area where I will admit I struggled in. And when I would have a student say, "Where do I turn in a paper again?" I would be like, "What do you mean where to turn in your paper? We've been doing this for 12 weeks now." But man, I was getting irrational. I would be sarcastic, which I hate admitting. But the problem is, when I allowed their question to set me off emotionally, my cognitive thinking really just plummeted. There were many more proactive ways that I could have handled situations. So sustained attention, find it easy to stay focused on my work. Once I start an assignment, I work diligently until it's completed. Even when interrupted, I find it easy to get back and complete a job at hand. So the capacity to pay attention, we know this, and important despite distractions. Can we complete a task no matter what's happening around us? Okay, so task initiation. No matter what the task, I believe in getting started as soon as possible. You might be chuckling at yourself a little bit as you think about this for your students. Procrastination is usually not a problem for me. I seldom leave tasks to the last minute. So task initiation is really that ability to start a project without procrastination, without being reminded over and over and over again. In the classroom, we're going to see in younger elementaries, maybe a child being able to put away or stop a preferred activity to go to a non-preferred activity. As we get older, we're going to see this in the ability to start a project before the last minute. Sarah Ward, the woman from the video in the beginning, suggests that teenagers can only see roughly 3 days in the future. And so that's all that their brain can handle and hold on to. And so if you have high school students or you're working with high school students and you give a semester-long project, they aren't going to think about that semester-long project due date until probably 3 days before. They know it's there. They're going to think about starting it. They're going to think about how they can starting it or how to start it, but they're not going to get any sort of sense of urgency until 3 days before. So this could be important because you're going to need to give checks along the way. And we're going to talk about that. So this goes back to the idea of the vision and having that goal in mind of getting something finished. If you don't have that mental picture, you're not going to have the initiation part. So if you don't have that cognitive part, the behavior part isn't going to happen. So planning and prioritizing. When I start my day, I have a clear plan in mind for what I hope to accomplish. When I have a lot to do, I can easily focus on the most important things. And I typically break down big tasks into subtasks and timelines. So you can see the statement for 18 can really affect task initiation as well. So planning and prioritizing, can we set a goal and can we accomplish that goal? Can we complete the task? So in the classroom, we're going to see this from the teacher perspective in upper grades, being able to break a task down for students and teaching them about each part For students, it's about settling peer conflicts. Can they do this effectively and quickly? Can they formulate a plan? Organization. This is one of my highest. I'm an organized person. It's natural for me to keep my area neat and organized. As I say that, I am getting all of my papers that I just turned in a nice, neat stack. It's natural for me to keep my area neat and organized. I'm good at maintaining systems for organizing my work. And I just want to say, if you're great at organizing, it doesn't mean you're great at the initiation part, and it doesn't mean that you're great at the goal setting and following through. So please keep each of these separate, because although they go along with each other and some of them cross and they're going to build, if you don't have that organizational skill, you're probably not going to get to that task completion stage. So in the classroom, we're going to see this as, can the child easily find materials in their backpack, notebook, or folder? Or locker. I left locker out. Always know where personal materials are and put items back in current locations. I know for 19 years, I don't know that this got any better among middle schoolers. Lockers got a little grosser. It was always fun on locker cleanout day because you never knew what smells you were going to get there. If you're in middle school, I think you can probably appreciate that. All right, time management. So while I am great at organization, time management is one area where I'm not great at. At the end of the day, I've usually finished what I set out to do. I'm good at estimating how long it takes to do something, and I'm usually on time for an appointment and activities. So it's really that capacity to estimate how much time one has. And I know personally, this part is hard for me. I know time. I know 60 seconds is a minute. I know what a minute looks like, but in my head, I struggle thinking, can I get this task accomplished in 60 seconds? So how to allocate the time and how to stay within time limits. So I'm good at staying in the time limits for due dates, but I'm not very good at estimating how long I think something's going to take me. So in the classroom, we're going to see this affecting work completed on time, students being tardy. Those are just some examples. If you have other examples for these, please feel free to throw them in the chat. So goal-directed persistence, I think of myself as being driven to meet my goals. I easily give up immediate pleasures to work on long-term goals. I believe in setting and achieving high levels of performance. I hope you're also starting to see that these skills are getting more advanced as we go through. So goal-directed persistence. Can you set a goal? Can you follow through despite distractions? You've got the visual, you know how to get there. Can you follow through? Can you stop doing something fun to achieve your goal? Not your full, oh, that typo is gonna drive me nuts. Find ways around obstacles and saving money for a purchase. So think of even yourself, your children. It's like when they get $5, they want to spend it, right? They have to blow it immediately. They can't save it to get something bigger or better that they want. Flexibility. This is my other weakness. I take unexpected events in stride. I easily adjust to changes in plans and priorities. I consider myself to be flexible and adaptive to change. When situations arise that I don't have control over, that I wasn't anticipating, I struggle revising my plans. It's one reason why technology scares me. I don't have all sorts of control over it. And when it doesn't go the way I think it's supposed to go, my brain starts to send really crazy signals that it's shutting down. So going back to that working memory piece and applying different rules to different settings, this is really that generalization of that, the idea of, if I'm doing one thing in one classroom, I can't do it in another. Or maybe one teacher allows gum chewing, but another teacher does not allow gum chewing. So that's holding on to that working memory, but it's going to come into that idea of flexibility too, because what if you have a student who's chewing gum and you didn't want him to chew gum and you ask him to spit it out? How quickly can they recover from that? Okay, so metacognition is our last one. And I thought I fixed these numbers. Apparently I did not. I routinely evaluate my performance and devise methods for personal improvement. I'm able to step back from a situation to make objective decisions. I'm a big picture thinker and enjoy the problem solving with that. So metacognition is one of the highest levels, for lack of a better term, of executive functioning. It's really being able to take all of the other executive functions, step back, and then assess the situation. So can you observe how to solve a problem? Can you figure out what you did right? Maybe what should be different next time? In a classroom, can a student change behavior based on feedback that you give them? Can a student examine their own work? Probably not. Are we asking them to examine their own work? Yes. We're asking them to do something that if they don't have other foundational skills for, they're not going to be able to do. And monitor own learning. Okay, so I'm not going to do this poll everywhere, but I was just going to ask if someone wanted to type into the chat, why do you think knowing your executive functioning strengths and weaknesses might matter in your classroom or even in your school? If you don't work directly with students, you're probably working with teachers who do. So why do you think it should matter if we know what our strengths and weaknesses are? And if you want to say what your strengths and weaknesses are, feel free to go ahead and tell us that in the chat as well. As you think about maybe adding something in the chat regarding that, I want us to really think about the big picture, the big question. How can we help our students in the classroom? Some of you might be thinking, well, this is what I've been waiting for. Yes, I know. But I believe that we have to have an understanding of the different executive functioning skills that our kiddos are coming to us with in order to apply some of these strategies. So one thing that we automatically think of, I know I did, when helping our students is we think, oh, let's provide them with a checklist, right? Because then here's the checklist, here's what you need to do, here's what you need to do in order, here's how you do your morning work, here are the 16 different steps to complete this research project. The problem with checklists and the teacher creating the checklist is that the student has not created the checklist. And so more often than not in a classroom, when there's a list of things that need to be accomplished, it's been created by the teacher, by the instructional assistant, by someone other adult in the classroom. And the problem is that when you create a checklist, you are creating a mental image of what the item on the checklist is. So if you have 3 different steps for the student, and step 3 is turn in the assignment, the students may struggle because they don't have a mental picture of what that is. You're the one who created the checklist, so you know what you're expecting, but the student may not. So if the student isn't creating the checklist, they're not getting that mental picture. Just as an experiment, think about making a grocery list. When you go to the grocery store, before you go to the grocery store, if you make a list, you start to make a list and you're thinking, okay, I need limes, and you write limes. But as you're writing limes, you are in your head, you're mentally picturing what a lime looks like and where a lime is in the grocery store. If you know that you need to get chicken and you write chicken on your list, you can visually, mentally picture yourself walking from the produce section to the meats, to where the poultry is. So you are starting to make those connections. You are getting the picture connected to the words. And a lot of strategies regarding executive functioning has to do with creating that mental image. And if the teacher is the one creating the mental image for the student, then the student isn't going to have the same understanding and expectations of what needs to be done. So if you think about high school in a longer research paper, you need to walk the students through that research paper. When I get to stage 1, here's what it looks like. I have research facts written on note cards. Okay, let's see them. You're showing the students, look, here's what I researched. Here are my note cards. Here's what this needs to look like. So we have to really get that mental image with the written words. Okay, so some easy, quick ways. We talked about brains and developing brains. And if a brain is in stress, if a brain is in a constant fight or flight, freeze mentality, it's going to be hard to get all of these executive functioning skills lined up. It's going to be difficult to reach that academic achievement in the classroom. One of the easiest, quickest things we can do is really start to build a relationship with the student. By building a relationship, we are going to lower that student's stress and anxiety level, even if it's only within our own classroom. But if we don't lessen that, if we don't help the students to relax their limbic system a little bit, they're never going to retain a skill because their brain is just going to constantly be firing. What do I do in this situation? Do I stay? Do I go? Do I not even react? And so you might think you're doing a great job of teaching something, but if that child doesn't have those foundational, like, emotional skills of understanding, this is a safe classroom, I'm not stressed out in here, I'm not anxious, then the other things aren't going to happen. So really keeping that idea of Maslow before Bloom in your mind. We know it's the relationship piece. We know it's having those basic needs met before you can really get to that academic achievement. Handshakes and high fives, those go a long way. Fist bump, anything that you can do with your students. I know we should always need to be cognizant of physical touch, and maybe you have a student who doesn't like to shake hands or doesn't want to give you a fist bump. Totally okay. You can give them a thumbs up, give them an air high five instead. You're still connecting with them. You're still making that relationship. Praise goes a long way also with students. Hey, I really like how you are writing those letters, or I love how you're paying attention as we're going through this. Give them praise on their actions. Check in with students. You can have quick check-ins, check-outs. Give students jobs. Make them feel like they have a responsibility in your classroom. We know that when you have a sense of responsibility, then you're going to have more ownership in whatever you're working on. Have high expectations for all your students. Don't lower expectations for a student just because, oh, that's just Johnny. No, Johnny needs to be held to those same high expectations as everybody else, because he's going to know if he's not. And then there's the 2x10. Spend 2 minutes a day for 10 straight class days talking to one student about anything except school. So just pick out a kiddo, start with one. You can start right after this webinar and just start talking to them. The first few days might be a little awkward. They don't know what you're doing. Maybe they think you're poking or prodding for information. Just ask them something. Hey, when you're not at school, what's your favorite thing to do? And just build off the conversation from there. So first thing we can do, build relationships. The second thing we can do is to reduce the cognitive load that we place on our students. Breaking tasks into chunks, activating that prior learning, have instructions in visual form. So we often give the instructions just vocally. We're expecting the students to auditorily input them. But maybe you need to write them down. Maybe you need to have a picture. What does it look like when I turn my assignment in? And post that picture up on the whiteboard or the board if you can project that. That way it's that visual cue for the student seeing, oh yes, I have to turn it into this folder, Or maybe it's a picture of the student handing the assignment to you. And these can be general pictures. I know you can personalize each one with your students. Provide information in multiple ways. And that just goes back to written, having pictures, giving things orally. Having routines will also help. Routines help to decrease cognitive load, and it increases the ability for a student to retain information. They know what the expectation is. They know what they're supposed to do. Thinking even as an adult and having a routine, you probably drive the same way to work every single day. What happens when that routine gets disrupted? What happens when there's road construction? Well, you can see things start to happen, right? The cognitive flexibility that we have, that task persistence and direction is going to start to take into effect, right? Because you're thinking, right, I still need to get to school. Now I've got to reroute myself or let the GPS reroute me. How quickly can I adapt from that? Just because my route got a little messed up on the way to school, can I recover quickly from that? Or is that going to put me in a bad mood for the rest of the day? Scaffolding is another great activity that you can use with your students. So connecting old concepts to new students, using visuals, you can start to see how some of these overlap. Front loading material, right? So give students more information than they need up front. Or if you have a student who you know struggles sometimes with vocabulary or content, give them key terms a couple days ahead of time and say, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about on Wednesday. Today's Monday. Take the next day and a half, look them over. Let me know if you have questions. That way you can be more prepared. Give students time to talk. Let them think and process through what you're going through. And then we're going to touch on this idea of backward chaining. Scaffolds are meant to be lessened and taken away. So scaffolding isn't, you should not be scaffolding the same way at the beginning of the year that you're scaffolding at the end of the year. Because if we're doing scaffolding correctly, we're going to be able to take those supports away. Can you imagine if you went into a building that was supposed to be finished, but still had all the concrete barriers on the side and the, the different construction scaffolds? You would think, what? This is not right. There's something wrong. And that's right. There is something wrong, right? The building is supposed to be supported all along the way. And then when all of those supports are taken back, the building stands and it works and it functions. Same way for our classrooms. As we scaffold, we need to keep in mind, okay, I'm going to give all of these supports now, but as we progress, I'm going to slowly take one away. So scaffolding, if you're unfamiliar with scaffolding, just think about walking across the street with a child. So if you have an infant, you are more than likely going to carry the infant across the street, maybe push the infant in a stroller. They've been very confined. They can't move out of the stroller. But then they progress into toddler stage. And so in the toddler, they're walking. So maybe you're holding their hand. Well, you holding their hand is a support. It's that scaffold that the child needs for the child's own safety. And then they get a little bit older, 7, 6, 5. And they don't necessarily have to hold your hand, but they need to be walking right next to you. As they get older, they can walk ahead of you or they can walk behind you successfully. You don't have to carry a 16-year-old across the street, right? Because you've put those supports in place when they were younger, and you just keep taking them back and taking them back to where the child is able to cross the street all alone. So think about that with your procedures in your classroom. Think about that with the work that you provide the students. How can you give them more supports in the beginning and then slowly take things away to ensure their success? The idea of backward chaining is also a pretty interesting concept if you aren't familiar with it. Backward chaining is it's the opposite of like forward chaining or even front loading. Starting with the end and working backward. So an example of backward chaining, to go back to a young child, when a young child learns to brush their teeth, you will take the child to the bathroom, right? You're going to get the toothbrush, you're going to get the toothpaste. When they're a baby, you're going to do all the steps, right? You're going to brush gums. But then when they get to be a toddler, they can start to do the brushing alone. But you're still going to the bathroom with them. You're still getting the toothbrush. You're still putting the toothpaste on. But now they are the one who might finish the task, brush their teeth, rinse out their toothbrush. And then once they have that piece down, then you take away another support, right? So we're using scaffolding as that support, but we're doing everything from reverse. So the idea of backward chaining is great for middle and high school students, because by the time students get to middle and high school, there will be several who never get to the point where they complete a project, or maybe even complete an assignment. And so they don't know what the success of turning something in is like. And so if you don't have that understanding of that feeling of success, you're going to be less inclined to persist, to keep getting things done. If a child knows, I'm never going to get this done, then why are they even going to start? So we can do things to get them to almost done, let them finish it, turn it in, and then get that satisfaction of knowing that they completed an assignment. So research, if you're doing a little research paper and you want a student to find 3 facts and then even just write a paragraph using those 3 facts, what might sound really easy, right? You're just saying, find 3 facts and write this paragraph. But sometimes the student is not going to be able to just find those 3 tasks. They might be overthinking it. They might not be like, well, I don't even know where I'm going to start. So my recommendation is you write those 3 tasks down, or those 3 pieces of information down, give them to the kiddo. Let the child then write the paragraph from the 3 facts that you've given them. And after you do that, then they get that accomplishment. Oh my goodness, I wrote this paragraph. Maybe the child isn't even ready to write the paragraph. So you give them the fact cards, and maybe you start to fill in some of the paragraph, and then you just have them pull the information from the card and put it into the paragraph and let them turn it in. Let them follow the procedure, build that confidence, and then you can start to take those supports away. So visually, we can use backward chaining in this strategy of get ready, do, and done. So this is from another suggestion from Sarah Ward. And she talks a lot about how effective executive functioning skills is really that perspective of the future self. So picturing yourself where you want to be and creating that vision. So one thing that we have to do is to take time to teach time. Our students may not be under time constrictions at home, and so they don't know what it's like to be on a time schedule. And so Sarah suggests using this idea of get ready, do, done, that we start with the done first, and we show the students what done looks like. It has to do with this idea of temporal awareness, which is the development of an internal time structure that recognizes the time between movement and when something needs to be accomplished by. And so we can help show time. And I'm going to go through a couple different strategies. So the first one that she uses with this get ready, do, done part is to actually start with the done. Start with that red part. Here's what the finished product is going to look like. So we've given students a visual, so they can start to get that visual in their mind and know this is where I need to be when I'm done. And then work backwards. Okay, here's what it looks like when it's done. Now, what do I need to make that happen? Well, here's what I need to do, or here's what I need to think about, what I need to plan for. And then the get ready part. Okay, I know what I need to do. Now, what do I need from there? And to work backward. So here's just another example of cueing and that idea of semantic recall. So How many times have you ever said to your own child, hey, I need you ready for soccer practice in 5 minutes because we're going to be leaving for soccer practice? And the kid thinks, okay, 5 minutes, I got 5 minutes. So they go into their room and then they're like, oh, I remember I put that toy down last night. So I want to finish playing with it. So I'm going to start playing with it. And then 5 minutes comes and you're yelling for the child to come so that you can leave for soccer practice. And they get out there and they've got one soccer cleat. They don't have shin guards, no socks, and they aren't ready at all. And you're thinking, I told you to get ready. Well, that's probably our problem, is that we're telling, we're not showing, we're not giving them that visual understanding of what we want. So when we say, I want you to be ready for soccer practice, here's what it looks like. We're going to look at the done first, right? So we could say to our child, and I know we wouldn't have pictures every time, but even going to a classroom, okay, tell me how you're going to turn in this assignment, or what is it going to look like when you walk into Mrs. Jones' room tomorrow morning. Really start to get that picture painted in their heads. That way they can look at this done and say, oh yeah, when I'm finished with my project, I know that I am taking it, I'm turning it into the tray in the back. Or maybe there's a spot in the front of the classroom where they're turning it in. Give them that visual cue so that they know what done looks like. Have you ever had a student who did the work? You know, you get 6 weeks in and they have 5 zeros, and you're trying to find this work and you find it and it's done. You're like, why didn't you turn this in? There could be a lot of reasons, but one of them could be they don't have this final understanding of what done looks like. We need to show them. We need to show them and we need to practice it. So this example, making time visible, is probably more appropriate for younger kids, but I do believe that middle schoolers can benefit from this. One important part is teaching kids how to tell time on a clock with hands, because sometimes it's not something kids can do, but it is so valuable to use the strategy, and it's worth it to teach students this skill of time. So Sarah talks a lot about writing on a clock and taking markers and chunking different sections of a time. So if you know you have 35 minutes for an assignment, an in-class assignment, like a little mini project, on the clock, draw and color in those different spaces. Okay, 5 minutes have elapsed. Here's what your assignment needs to look like. Are you here? You can even put stickers up there, or just a little post-it with some word cueing in the child's mind. But section that time out for them. Maybe the planning part takes 5 minutes. It's going to take 5 minutes for me to get my art box, to get the supplies I need to complete this project. Okay, so after 5 minutes are up, I know I should be back at my table, at my desk, and I should have this opened, and this is what I should have in front of me. So then maybe 10 minutes have passed and the students can see, and you're talking them through this, right? You're not just putting it up there, but they can see, okay, 10 minutes have elapsed. There are 3 parts to this project. Do I have part 1 done? If you do, then you're on track to get the rest of the assignment completed. 5 minutes to go. Oh, here's my warning. I need to be almost ready because I know that I only have 5 minutes to get that completed. Class-wide interventions are something that we can also use more for behavior than anything. But this is class-wide interventions, especially right now, are so important because they really give us the ability to reach more students. Some of the interventions that we are using, some of the scaffolds might be very student specific, but these behavior interventions, we can teach as a whole class and everyone's going to benefit. It's going to save time, it's going to be lower impact on resources. It's going to really take that proactive approach to helping students with things like impulse control, which I'll talk more about here in a moment. And it's going to have positive effects for stronger and weaker students. So some examples of some class-wide interventions that we could do are these ideas of the good behavior game, the mystery motivator, and then really increasing those opportunities for students to respond in those total participation techniques. I don't want to spend a lot of time because I really want to wrap up in the next minute or so, so that you can ask questions. But the good behavior game and the mystery motivator are very similar. You want to determine when to play each game, and you want to think about as a skill that maybe your class in general is lacking. Maybe your class in general is having a hard time raising hands or getting out of their seat. The impulsivity is very high in your class. So we need to go back to teaching these behaviors. So you're going to determine when you play the good behavior game, and you're going to be very upfront with the students and tell them, okay, our time for good behavior or the desired behavior is starting now. You might want to be careful of calling it the good behavior game, I suppose, because then they think they can misbehave the other 6 hours of the school day. But clearly define and identify the negative behaviors. So if your students are having issues with impulse control, you need to tell them, here's what the behavior we're going to try to correct. Leaving your seat. When you're allowed to leave your seat, when you need to stay in your seat. Determine the daily reward or the weekly reward. So when you play these games, you do need to be rewarding your students somehow. Maybe it's just 5 extra minutes of recess. Maybe it's a 10-minute free day on Friday. Really depends on the grade level of the students and how much of a delayed opportunity that they can have for feeling like they accomplished the goal and really linking the behavior to the reward. So then you're going to divide the class into 2 teams. And this is on you, because you're going to have to keep track of this. So don't do it at a time when you're not going to be able to pay attention to the full class. But for the students, define the target behavior and give them replacement behaviors. So if you want the students to not blurt out answers, maybe a replacement answer is to just put their hand over their mouth. That's going to give a signal to you that they're controlling their impulse, but it also gives them something to do instead of the behavior. So raising your hand is great. You could say it with the replacement behavior. Instead of blurting out, raise your hand. But really, covering the mouth or putting your hand in front of your mouth is going to be more effective because it's going to give that child that, oh yes, there's a barrier there. I'm supposed to watch what I say when I have that barrier up. And then, you want to give your teams, we're going to look for only, if you can do this 2 times or less, then you're going to win. And then keep track of that. So also have a visual of the replacement behavior that you want. So maybe have a couple pictures of like a hand up in front of a mouth or something for the students to look at. Create a reward envelope and maybe you just randomly draw for a reward. The mystery motivator is very similar, except the kids don't know what they're working for. It could be a paperclip. It could be half a day of a fun day. They don't know. Another is to really increase those opportunities to respond. So give them whiteboards, Post-its. Can they have group graffiti walls where they're writing responses up out of their seat? Fist to 5, using fist as a 0, 5 is the max. Like how well do you feel like you understand the concept of multiplying by 9s and that you could teach it to someone on a fist to 5? 0, I'm completely lost. I didn't even know we were working on multiplication. To 5. Yep, I could teach this to my little brother anytime now. And so fist to 5 gives the student opportunities to interact with you in a nonverbal way, but the students can also do it close to their body so that other students can't see them and look, so that you don't have to have them feel like, oh, I'm a 3, right? You can have them do 3 so that it's just only something that you see and not the rest of the class. Think, pair, share, and square. So have the students thinking about something, let them sharing it with one other pair, and then 2 pairs get together to form a square to share out ideas that way. What's something that you liked, you learned, and you wonder more about? Using technology, Kahoot, clickers, voting with your feet. That's just a fancy way to say stand up. So children are like what, Simone? Whatever falls on them makes an impression. And what we do every day in our classroom is going to make an impression. So if we're providing those proactive supports, that piece of helping them feel safe, then all of these skills will eventually fall into place. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be automatic. We certainly have things that we can do to get the students where they are. So in the chat, type any questions, comments that you have. And as we wrap up, there is an evaluation that I would ask that you complete for me. You can scan it on your phone. I will put the link to the evaluation in the chat. And be sure that you choose the executive functioning in today's classrooms so that you're on the right training. And it's indianaieprc.org/eval. And I know it's almost to our time, and I want to be very respectful of your time, but I do have a few minutes and I can hang out if you have any questions. Here is my contact information. Please feel free to email. You can call, that's my work number, text, whatever is easiest for you. I really want to be here to help and support you. If I didn't give you something that you were looking for, please let me know. I will do all that I can to reach out back to find the information that you want so that I can help you. And then on the Padlet, I have the links to different books and research articles and the executive functioning questionnaire that you can get access to. So you'll have to click on the link and then you'll have to enter your email address, but then you'll get access to it. Oh, thank you for joining, Kim. Sometimes these trainings are so difficult to do over Zoom. I can't see your faces. I don't know if you're rolling your eyes or laughing or, so I appreciate you being on here today. And I'm glad the examples were helpful. I hope that I provided enough from different contexts, grade levels to reach everyone on here today. I know people are hopping off and that's perfectly fine. I think if you have a question, you should be able to unmute yourself also. Sarah, yes, share it with your staff, please. We are working out the final details of our contract that starts October 1st. And I would even hope that if you wanted to do a professional development, there may be the opportunity for me to come and work with your staff if it's something you guys would want to do on like a PLC time. You can even do it on a rotating basis if your PLCs are built into your school day. Cassandra, thank you for being on. All right, if there's nothing else, I will go ahead and hop off. But again, do not hesitate to reach out to me. Oh, in-source, yes, Sarah, that's so true. Yeah, it is great for us to learn. I think as adults, it's great for us to have a refresher. And like I said, the link to the recording will be up on that Padlet soon. I'm glad you struggled too. Just a little bit because it makes me feel a little more human. All right, everyone, I hope you have a great day and I look forward to doing more trainings with you and for you. Reach out, let us know what else you might need help with.